Good evening. My name is Yoram Biton and I'm the Hebraic section head. On behalf of the African and Middle East Division, I want to welcome you to the Library of Congress and to this special event featuring one of the foremost scholars of Jewish music and culture, Dr. Edwin Sarusi. Dr. Sarusi, a leading ethnomusicologist and a cultural historian, is Professor Emeritus of Musicology and Director of the Jewish Music Research Center at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. His groundbreaking work explores the musical traditions of Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews communities, with a particular focus on liturgical and popular musical traditions. The intersections of Jewish and Muslim musical cultures and the ways music transmits memory, identity, and heritage across generations and geographies. Dr. Dr. Sarusi's scholarship is as rich and layered as the communities he studies. He has published extensively, created influential exhibitions and recordings, and brought global attention to Judeo-Spanish and North African Jewish musical traditions. His research bridges past and present, connecting historical sources with living traditions and contemporary performance. This evening's lecture and concert, Echoes of Andalus, is presented as part of our celebration of American Jewish Heritage Month, observed each May. Marking this occasion with Moroccan Jewish music may seem unexpected, given that the majority of American Jews today are of Eastern European descent. Yet, this celebration also offers an opportunity to highlight lesser known but significant chapter in American Jewish history. The first person of Jewish ancestry elected to the United States House of Representatives and later to be the first Jew elected the United States Senate was David Levi Yulee, who was born in Assuera, Morocco in 1810. He served as a senator from Florida in the years leading up to the Civil War. Levi came from a distinguished Moroccan Jewish family. His father, Moses Elias Levi, who immigrated to the Florida territory, was a businessman, planter, and noted social and religious reformer. And he probably started the first Jewish school in the United States. But this is for another lecture. So, in honoring American Jewish heritage through Moroccan Jewish music, we are not only celebrating a rich cultural tradition, we are also remembering the diverse roots that have helped shape the American Jewish story. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing Dr. Sarusi speak on Moroccan Jewish musical memory at the Library of Congress, the Abraham Pinto Collection. Please welcome Dr. Sarusi.
Thank you very much, Yoram, for this kind introduction. And thank you for organizing this event. Yoram, the head of the Africa and Middle Eastern Division. And I also want to thank personally Sana Mizra, the program specialist of the division, for organizing so amazingly this event. Dear public, dear friends, representatives of the Embassy of the Kingdom of Morocco here, thank you for coming. On October 5th, 1968, Mr. Abraham Pinto, a businessman from Tangier, Morocco, residing between Madrid and Shelter Island, New York, offered the Library of Congress a set of tapes containing about 24 hours of recordings of Jewish liturgical music carried out at his initiative. After almost 2 years of negotiations, a copy of these recordings was eventually incorporated into the Archive of Folk Culture. Established in 1928, this archive was originally called the Archive of American Folk Song, a section of the Music Division of Library of Congress. Today, it is part of the American Folklife Center, which is right down the corridor. The exchange between Mr. Pinto and Library of Congress, generously shared to me by the library, shows that two other institutions were involved at the very same time in the preservation of these unique documents of Moroccan Jewish sound. Yeshiva University in New York and the Jewish National University Library in Jerusalem, today the National Library of Israel. I was aware of the Jerusalem copy of Mr. Pinto recordings, but I was surprised to learn about the Library of Congress copy back in 1999, when I became involved with yet another set of historical recordings of Moroccan Jewish and non-Jewish religions music, the Paul Bowles collection. What surprised me then was to find at Library of Congress 2 additional tapes from the Pinto collection that were not accounted for in Jerusalem. I shall return to the contents of these recordings after sharing with you some thoughts about the interrelation between memory, individual agency, modern displacements, and the making of archives in relation to Abraham Pinto. A captivating figure about whom I began to really learn only while preparing this presentation. So I'm telling you today for the first time this amazing story of this man and his relation to this library. The Abraham Pinto collection raises several issues that go beyond its specificity. What are the motivations of individual agents in recording the musical tradition of their community for posterity at specific moments in modern history? How did new technologies of recording facilitate such enterprises? Why and how did such agents negotiate with established institutions in order to find a permanent home for their recordings? How do such recordings relate to other recording enterprises carried out in the same community about the same time by other agents? And finally, what can one learn from these recordings in the absence of substantial metadata information about the recordings? And how do the descendants of the recorded community relate to these sound documents? I propose to address the Pinto collection in the framework of what I have called the modern anxiety of forgetting. The accessibility of sound recording technologies for private use after World War II coincided with the rapid post-war and post-colonial geopolitical realignments that caused major social disruptions, massive migrations, and the rise of new nation-states. Post-World War II Moroccan Jewry is a good example of such processes. It was torn apart between the interests of the post-colonial independent movement in Morocco and the agents of the recently established Jewish nation-state, Israel. These events took place on the background of a process of urbanization and secularization affecting the traditional social structures of the Moroccan Jewish communities, a community that exists in Morocco perhaps for almost 2,000 years. The weakening of rabbinical authority led to a looser observance of religious practices, such as regular synagogue attendances. Moroccan Jewry was spread throughout the country. In the north, which is the sections that are relevant to this lecture today, but also in the inner lands in the center of the country, and also in the south. These are the major settlements. While the convergence of Jews from diverse areas of Morocco into the new urban hubs, the colonial capital of Casablanca above all, to which most Moroccan Jews immigrated eventually, led to the erosion of discrete liturgical traditions in favor of a unified practice marked by the hegemony of a specific strand of Moroccan Jewish liturgical music. So there was like a unification of different styles of singing in the synagogue. Considering this complex historical background, it becomes clearer why Mr. Pinto, a scion of a very cosmopolitan Jewish family from Tangier, as we shall see, living by choice in exile between New York and Madrid, would have recruited his financial resources and his access to the new portable recording technologies to memorialize the liturgical music of his community. Moreover, his effort to disperse the recorded collection he initiated between Jewish, American, and Israeli institutions can be interpreted as an effort to make his community's traditional lore accessible to the widest possible audience. However, this is only a partial interpretation of Pinto's initiative, because as it turns, he sponsored other recordings of Moroccan Jewish music beyond the main centerpiece of his ethnographic effort, the Liturgy of the Jews of Tangier. The additional tapes I found at the Library of Congress include recordings by Rabbi David Buzaglo, arguably the most distinguished religious singer of Moroccan Jewry in the 20th century. The Andalusian music you heard now outside, so Rabbi Buzaglo was the main performer, the main singer. Let's listen to a clip from the collection of Library of Congress of Rabbi Buzaglo. This is an anthem, and in a piut, Igdal Elohim, high, magnify the living God and be praised for the Sabbath evening. I will let you guess what is the origin of the melody, because I think some of you will recognize it. Any guess? All lone sang. Scottish folk song. I don't have time today to tell you how it reached the synagogue and how it reached this recording. I will leave you with the guess. Another section included in the Pinto collection here at the Library of Congress is a very rare recording of a ahwash, a ritual of the Amazigh-speaking populations of Morocco, usually called Berbers, but today the politically correct concept is Amazigh. Both non-Jews and Jews performed at festival of weddings. Let's listen to just a few bars. And this is a picture from a postcard that will return in this lecture, because this is a postcard that Pinto sent to Library of Congress. My most recent inquiries into Mr. Pinto's activities led to two conclusions. One, that he employed several subcontractors that recorded on his behalf, and two, that there were more recordings initiated by him that I did not know of. What emerged from this inquiry was Pinto's wide interest on the multi-layered musical memory of the Moroccan Jews, even beyond his own community of Tangier and beyond the liturgical repertoire. Put differently, it shows a sort of national approach to Moroccan Jewry, characteristic of the self-perception of the community that developed during the colonial period, the first half of the 20th century. This approach crossed the distinctiveness of the diverse Jewish communities spread throughout the Kingdom of Morocco, creating a new modern sense of Moroccan Jewishness, of a unified Moroccan Jewishness. Who was then Mr. Pinto? My journey in his footsteps led me to a fascinating encounter with a transcontinental network of agents involved in maintaining the memory of the Jewish community of the cosmopolitan port city of Tangier, an international zone prior to Moroccan independence and its diasporas. You can see here the city of Tangier, and you can see the Jewish quarter in the center of the city, very close to the harbor. This is a picture of the Jewish quarter in Morocco, in Tangier. A colleague of mine, Dr. Oro Anahori-Livrovich, a scholar of Judeo-Spanish song from North Morocco, living in Montreal and a Moroccan himself, was my point of departure. I wanted to know, who are you, Mr. Pinto? Not only I trusted her deep knowledge of the Spanish-speaking Moroccan Jewish community, but the name of Abraham Pinto popped up twice in my research from her profuse recorded collection of Judeo-Spanish songs that she graciously donated to the National Library of Israel. As it turns, Mr. Pinto was present when Oro, my friend, recorded in New York in 1971 the lady called Flora Ohana, who just happened to be his sister-in-law living in New York City. Moreover, the voice of Mr. Pinto unexpectedly popped up in another recording by my colleague, this one a recording made in Madrid in 1972. And here we have a short snippet of the voice of Pinto, which I never heard until I prepared this lecture. And this voice clip is inserted in this recording of Judeo-Spanish Moroccan women singing.
Creo que prosigo desde hace algún tiempo de reunir y conservar para la posteridad lo más posible de notas, voces y costumbres que forman la liturgia y el folclore sefardí en Marruecos. Aprovecho mi paso por Casablanca para rodar a Salomón Pinto me exponga ante el micrófono algo respeto a ciertas solemnidades religiosas.
So what he basically saying here in pure Castilian Spanish from Madrid is that he set up as the goal of his life to record and preserve all the traditions of Moroccan Jewry as much as he can. In their monograph on the Judeo-Spanish ballads from New York, the deans of the Judeo-Spanish song research, Professor Armistead and Silverman, mention a collection of 26 romances of traditional songs from Morocco taped by Abraham Pinto before 1978, a tape acquired by Professor Silverman. This proves that Pinto was in contact also with the most important personalities of academia engaged in the 1970s in the research of the Judeo-Spanish song. No further details about these recordings are provided. However, the number of items under content prove clearly that these are the recordings of my friend, Oro, that he copied and preserved in his own archive. Sorry. Dr. Anahori-Livrovich directed me to Mrs. Sonia Cohen, one of the few Jews still living in Tangier. Sonia is actively involved with establishment and maintenance of the brand new museum of Tangier, or Jewish Museum of Tangier, that opened in 2022, as you can see in this slide. Our lovely conversation in pure Castilian Spanish, Sonia directed me to Mrs. Vera Pinto Lasri in Tel Aviv, whose father was a cousin of Abraham Pinto. Vera was also extremely cordial and directed me to her brother-in-law, David Lasri, who also was a resourceful source of information. From him, I received details about who actually carried out the Pinto recordings, the genealogical tree, as you can see, of the Pinto family, and the picture of Abraham Pinto that you have seen at the beginning of this lecture. As this genealogy shows, Abraham was the son of 8 children of Moses Pinto. Moses Pinto was himself an adventurer. Oh, okay. Here you see Moses Pinto with his brothers. These were Moroccan Jews that embarked in the rubber rush of the Amazonas. They moved from Morocco to the inner lands of Brazil in search of the rubber trade, and they became extremely rich. This is why Abraham Pinto inherited from his father the means to have a very comfortable life and be able to dedicate himself to sponsor all these recordings. As you can see from, as you can see from, there is a website built up by the Pinto family to publish the memories of the entire Pinto brothers, father and uncle of our Abraham Pinto. Mr. Lasry also connected me to Mrs. Jennifer Pinto Safran, the grandniece of Abraham Pinto living in New York City. Mrs. Pinto Safian responded enthusiastically within minutes that I contacted her. She fondly depicted her grand-uncle as a gentle, though somewhat eccentric man, who together with his older brother Jacques, the father of Mr. Pinto Safian, was involved in many philanthropic activities. After contacting other members of the family, she also informed me that the library of Mr. Pinto in Madrid, including the prayer books that he used, was donated by his adoptive daughter, Mrs. Pilar Blanco, as he had no direct inheritors, to the Jewish community of Oviedo in the province of Asturias, Spain. In one of the announcements of his donation in Oviedo, local newspaper, Blanco, who defined herself as an adopted Jew, stated that Pinto bequeathed 10% of all his personal property for philanthropic causes for his people, as she put it. In addition, Tanjawi Jews, these are the Jews of Tangier. I don't want to call them Tangerine Jews, but that's a way in English. The Tanjawi Jews also referred me to Gladys and Sidney Pimienta, a sister and brother from Tangier living in Israel, whom I have known for many years. The Pimientas dedicated efforts to document and disseminate the history of the lore and the lore of the Spanish-speaking Jews of North Morocco. Sidney Pimienta surprised me. He not only knew Abraham Pinto personally, but he collaborated with him by recording in 1978, with the support of Mr. Pinto, as you can see in this cassette, the readings of the entire book of Psalms, 150 Psalms, one after the other, the Song of Songs and the Book of Ruth in Judeo-Spanish, by another cantor from Tangier, Mr. Abraham Ponte.
אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך בעשת רשעים ובדרך חטאים לא עמל ובמושב לשים לא ישב כי אם בתורת אדוני חפצו ובתורתו יגה יומם ולילה.
This is one of the ancient layers of Jewish musical memory, period. The singing of psalms according to the reading of the Moroccan Jews. What you heard are echoes of really very ancient tradition that we can hear thanks to Mr. Pinto. In addition, Sidney Pimienta informed me that the recordings of Rabbi Chaim Cohen of Tangier that comprise the bulk of the Pinto collection here at Library of Congress, this is the man, were carried out in reel-to-reel tape by a gentleman called Yamim Sudri of Tangier. In our conversation, Pimienta mentioned the name of other previous acquaintance of mine, Rabbi Moshe Nahon of Gibraltar, another avid investigation of the Moroccan Jewish liturgy from Tangier, the city of his parents. Once again, I was surprised by the wealth of information about Abraham Pinto that Rabbi Nahon most generously shared with me and with you. Many of the pictures you are seeing here, including the picture of Chaim Cohen, are by Rabbi Nahon. He also sent me pictures of letters written by and to Abraham Pinto. He also informed me that another set of recordings initiated by Pinto, this time the whole Hebrew Bible, the whole Torah, the 5 books of the Pentateuch, were recorded by Rabbi Yehuda Ben Asulin of Alcázar Quibir in Spanish North Morocco, and shared an interview that he carried in Israel in 2018 with Rabbi Chaim Cohen, the main contributor, as we have seen, to Pinto's ethnography. This last item was a bit of an embarrassment for me as a scholar, because I never imagined, knowing the voice of Chaim Cohen from the recordings by Pinto, that he would be still alive next to me in 2018. So thanks to Rabbi Nahon, I could hear an interview with Chaim Cohen in which he tells the whole story, how the Library of Congress recordings were made. So now we have also that information. The materials provided by Rabbi Nahon allowed me to even more precise appreciation of Abraham Pinto's worldview, network of relationships, and modus operandi. First, it dated the beginning of the recordings to early 1965. As we can see from this exchange of letters between Pinto and Rafael Ben Azaraf, a leading figure of Moroccan Jewish diaspora, in which he enclosed the first installment of the catalog of the recordings. I hope by now you are not confused about all these Pintos, all these family relations. I just want to picture in front of you this network of a cosmopolitan community dispersed in different continents, and everyone keeping a bit of the memory of the community. From the interview of Rabbi Nahon with Chaim Cohen, we learned that the recordings were made at the office of the local school of the Alliance Israélite Universelle in Tangier. And here you see the typewritten, the dactylographic classroom of the Alliance in Tangier. That was the same school where the recordings were made. Mr. Sudri, who had already been mentioned to me by Sidney Pimienta, was, after all, the secretary of the director of the Alliance School, and indeed, he made the recordings on behalf of Abraham Pinto. He used a Grundig reel-to-reel machine that belonged to the school, while Mr. Pinto provided the tapes for the recordings. All the recordings were made over a period of few months, in weekly sessions, sometimes twice a week. Most probably, Mr. Sudri also typed the catalog of the contents of the tapes. And here you hear Chaim Cohen telling in Spanish how the recordings were made. So we have also this document now. And here you can see the typewritten catalog of all the recordings, a copy here in library. This is the copy of Library of Congress. And now we know that most probably they were typed in those typewriters of the classroom that you just saw of the Alliance. We learned then that during the last 2 decades of his life, from roughly 1965 to 1985 when he died, Abraham Pinto was steadily engaged in diverse initiatives to document the musical lore of the Moroccan Jews across 3 continents, North Africa, Europe, and North America, with emphasis on the traditions of his city of birth, Tangier. His ethnographic pursuit was well beyond what I knew when I became interested on the copy of the Pinto collection at Library of Congress. His collection of recordings included mostly, but not only, the Liturgy of Tangier as sung by Chaim Cohen and as performed by the numerous synagogues of the Jewish quarter. I'm sorry. You can see here some visuals of the Jewish quarter of Tangier, and these are the synagogues from where the music is heard. The most beautiful and still active synagogue in Tangier is the Nahon synagogue, which is, of course, part of the Nahon clan to which Rabbi Nahon of Gibraltar belongs, and it's one of the most beautiful synagogues in the world, if you ask me, in Tangier. So if you happen to visit Tangier, this is a must to see. We also have seen that the Judeo-Spanish song repertoire of the North Moroccan women's ceremonial readings of biblical books and the lore of the greatest 20th century Jewish singer of Morocco and Amazigh rituals were all within the interest of Pinto. He engaged several collaborators in this documentary mission and covered the expenses incurred in making copies of the recordings while rewarding the informants. In addition, he generously shared his recordings with institutions and scholars. Pinto's sharing of the recordings with Library of Congress started with a telling letter that is worth reading at least one paragraph. The letter dated October 28, 1968, a document that says the following: "Gentlemen, in the past few years I have been recording Moroccan Jewish liturgy as it has been chanted in certain synagogue of Spanish tradition," and here is very important the terminology he uses. "Recently, Mr. Alan Lomax heard one of my tapes, and he thought that your department should have a copy of my tapes. The melodies, tunes, intonations, and rhythm of the services of the synagogues are not all over the same. Those of the synagogues of Morocco have Spanish tradition and might be quite unique. The Jewish population of Morocco has been rapidly emigrating, and it is, I fear, that their way of chanting may be lost. Therefore, I have been trying to collect as much as I can, etc., etc." This text concisely summarizes most of the issues that I have raised at the beginning of my talk, such as the modern anxiety of forgetting, the agency of an individual in preserving collective memory on behalf of the entire community, the accessibility of recording technologies, and the awareness of the plurality of the Jewish people. All synagogues are not the same. Yet, this letter adds an important detail. Pinto's acquaintance with one of the towering figures of music ethnography and ethnomusicology in the United States, Alan Lomax. Lomax was the director of the Archive of Folk Song at Library of Congress between 1937 and 1942, quitting after Congress cut the funding of the archive. Okay, I hope you got the idea. The fleeting encounter between Lomax and Pinto had, from my perspective, a poetic dimension. The encounter between the unlikely relationship between a solitary Moroccan Jewish entrepreneur and an all-American paragon of ethnic and folk music research in the United States. Contextualizing this encounter with Lomax's biography, his acquaintance with Pinto is not totally surprising after all. For example, in 1952-3, Lomax maintained a short correspondence with Dr. Edith Gershon-Kiwi, a pioneer of Jewish ethnomusicology in the then recently created State of Israel. She came from Germany. In the framework of their exchange, Kiwi sent Lomax recordings of Jewish communities, which I think are here in Library of Congress, while Lomax sent back to her a tape with recordings he had of Moroccan Jewish women. Put differently, Lomax, who also carried extensive fieldwork in Spain and later on in Morocco, was informed about the Spanish Jews, as Pinto referred to the Sephardi Jews of North Morocco. Their encounter then was the continuation of Lomax's continuous interest on Spanish, Moroccan, and Jewish musical traditions from Morocco. The actual reception of the Pinto recordings at the Library of Congress is yet another episode that informs us about the collector's peculiar personality. Mrs. Ray Corson, then in charge of the Archive of Folk Song, was the official Library of Congress of the Library of Congress in charge of the procurement of Pinto's tapes. As you can see, she linked Pinto's contribution to that of Paul Bowles. Moreover, Lomax's recommendation was an important factor in her decision. So you see the connection between the tradition of Library of Congress in documenting Moroccan music in general and Moroccan Jewish music in particular. You can see here Mrs. Corson recording in the studio here in Library of Congress in 1964. She's sitting there. Her response to Pinto's offer was therefore very positive, and she moved fast forward to secure the transfer of the tapes. However, at this point, Pinto became silent. All their efforts to reach Pinto were unsuccessful. Even the director of the music division goes to New York, knocks on the door, calls the phone, no Pinto to be found. Therefore, the project was canceled. After 2 months, Pinto resurfaces, writing postcards from Morocco's inner land. Here you have a postcard from the Library of Congress archive. Pinto writing from Marrakesh, attending the ahwash that you saw in the postcard. So 2 postcards in which Pinto writes, they say, I got your letters, don't worry, I am a nomad Jew. That's how he defines himself. The letters then by Mr. Corson reach him, and Pinto promised that upon his return to America, he's going to send the tapes, which he did. 2 days after the postcards from Marrakesh reached Washington, D.C., the Pinto project is reinstated. And yet the archive remains silent for almost a year and a half more. Only on September 16, 1970, a package with the tapes is sent from the post office in Shelter Island. Now to Dr. Alan Jabbour, the new director of the Archive of Folk Song. What was the cause of this long delay? I could not find in all my research. But all in all, it took 2 years for the recordings to come to Library of Congress. Shelter Island was another home of Pinto in New York. He had an apartment in Central Park West, and he had a very unexpected location from me. This is a very waspy place, not for a Moroccan Jew. Here you have browsing through the archive in this marvelous age of the internet, I found the Shelter Island report. And I found the Pinto-owned property there apparently since the 1950s on Osprey Road, and that he was a pioneer in solar energy in the United States, installing Israeli panels in his home in Shelter Island in 1977. According to Mrs. Pinto Safian, his niece from New York City, his home on the island was a very modest cottage. So I did some investigation on real estate in Shelter Island today. This is 29 Osprey Road, and this may be something like the house that Pinto had in Shelter Island, a modest cottage, as she put it. The original tapes were returned to Pinto more than a year after he sent them. Asked to provide more details about the recordings, Pinto simply writes that although he did not attend the recording sessions, he caused the recordings to be done. A last request from Pinto ordering from Library of Congress copies of his tapes was aborted by his refusal to pay the estimate cost of the work, $780 of 1972. The Pinto collection of Jewish liturgical music from Tangier is unique in its scope. However, it is worth noticing that it's not the only one on this subject. Some contextualizing can enhance our understanding of the Pinto collection in terms of the history of Jewish music ethnography in the post-war period. Pinto's very modern anxiety over the disappearance of traditional musical memory of Jews at the time of serious upheaval was shared by other agents and not necessarily members of the same community being documented. Preceding Pinto in the documentation of the Jewish liturgical music in Tangier were two distinguished women scholars, both of them of Ashkenazi descent, who pursued the immortalizing of Jewish musical memory of Moroccan Jews, driven by motivations not unlike those of Mr. Pinto, but totally unrelated to him. Dr. Johanna Spector, who became professor of ethnomusicology at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City, carried intensive fieldwork in Israel between 1951 and 3 before returning to America. In 1955, she is in Morocco, where she made an incredible journey in a boat with Moroccan Jews from Morocco to Israel, and she recorded Moroccan cantors on the boat. Apparently, Spector designed this opportunity in order to make sure that when the Moroccan Jews land in Israel, they are already transformed into something else. So you better catch them before they are sort of, how should I say, touched by another civilization, if I may put it. She recorded Mr. Yosef Siboni on June 6, 1955, and this was certainly a most unique ethnographic setup. Henrietta Yurchenko, an American ethnomusicologist, folklorist, and radio producer and host, a communist Jew from New York, and a close acquaintance of Alan Lomax, certainly enough, is no stranger to Library of Congress that holds part of her recorded collection. However, not Jewish at all, but native Mexican ones. She recorded natives in Mexico. With a grant from the American Philosophical Society, Yurchenko journeyed to North Morocco, arriving there to Tetuan on March of 1956, right when Spain started to retreat from its North Moroccan colonial possessions and Moroccan Jewry started the mass migration to Israel. Her 3-month stay enabled her to involve herself with the life of the Jewish community of Tetuan and Tangier, of the Spanish-speaking Jews of Morocco that hosted her. The intimacy of her relation with her host can be heard in this amazing LP that was put out by Folkways here in New York City in the late 1950s. In her recording of Salomon Siboni, who was at the time the cantor of the Rabbi Akiva Laredo Synagogue in Tangier, 6 excerpts by Cantor Siboni are included in this album. The album includes also the CV by Siboni, and this is his voice, recorded 1956. This is a beautiful melody for, this is a dirge for the 9th of Av, for the 9th of the Jewish month of Av, when the memory of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem is reminded. And this is one of the traditional old melodies of the Moroccan Jews. The recordings by Yurchenko remain in her home in New York. They were never released, only that LP was released. But again, through the agency of one of my most beloved colleagues, Dr. Shoshana Baik-Shahak, she procured all the cassettes from Yurchenko, and we have them today as part of the National Library collection. And that, in a way, is in conversation with the Pinto collection. As far as I know, the only item of the extensive Pinto collection that was released commercially is this one. It is a recording of Cantor Haima Cohen, of course. This recording is also in Library of Congress, singing Haggadah, one kid, a folk song found at the end of the Passover Haggadah that was released by Folkways from a copy of the Pinto collection, actually not from Library of Congress, but from Yeshiva University. Cohen sings in the original Aramaic, but also in the Judeo-Spanish translation customary in Tangier. Now, I will tell you something. I wasn't sure that I was going to tell you this, but biographical note by me. In this LP, the next track is me singing Haggadah, as I remember from my family. And the situation is that the editor of this LP, Dr. Schwadron from UCLA, was totally obsessed with this song, and he recorded Jews from all around the world the same song. He thought that he can explain what the Jewish people is through one song. I came to his office the day I arrived at UCLA. He interviewed me. And the first question he asked me, he said, "Do you know how to sing Haggadah?" I said, "Yeah." "Can you sing it for me?" And I said, "Okay, if you want." He's the chairman of the department. How can I refuse? He took me down to the studio. I recorded Haggadah. After 3-4 years, I'm coming back to the Sound Archive in Jerusalem, and everybody's laughing. They got the long play with me, not as a researcher, but as a person being researched. And since then, my point of view as a scholar on the limits separating the scholar and scholarship from real life became much more sophisticated. And this is the poetical example that a recording by Pinto is followed by my voice. I didn't intend this, but I thought I will share this with you tonight. Let me conclude this journey through the life and ethnographic effort of Abraham Pinto by returning to some of the themes with which I open this lecture. Pinto's modern anxiety is reflected in this document that he sent to Library of Congress to explain the motivations for his collecting effort. The Jewish people were faithful to their traditions, he says, and yet their essential uniqueness is affected by external influence, as he put it. Western culture, in which Pinto was certainly embedded, appears here as a threat to the national continuity of the Jewish people. The archive is therefore the last refuge against this conundrum. Pinto was a nomad, as he put it, as we saw. And if you want, he was a sort of modern wandering Jew. A cryptic letter from Pinto to his friend Rafael Ben Azaraf from June 8, 1977, encapsulates the man's state of mind towards the end of his life. On the top of the letter, there are 2 stickers, each with a different address in 2 continents, as if he could not decide which is his permanent address. The letter was first typewritten and then expanded in handwriting more than once as a sort of Talmudic text in which he expands explaining what he means in the letter. In short, this document underscores a restless modern Jew looking for a definition of self in an era of turmoil and even confusion, seeking answers to questions that apparently eluded him. He was not alone in experiencing this sense of displacement that Jewish modernity entailed. Those voices he recorded. Were also Jews forced to move to recast themselves beyond their homeland. The finding of a copy of the most substantial section of the Abraham Pinto recorded collection here at Library of Congress is therefore one more footprint left behind by this restless modern Moroccan Jew. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
So, thank you, Edwin, for your beautiful lecture. Now we understand more the collection. And please, if you want to see the collection, you are welcome to the Library of Congress. Questions? We have a few minutes for questions. Do we have a microphone? Okay, so
We will bring the mic to you, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarusi. My question is, in the Pinto collection, is it all cantors singing liturgical songs, or is there any secular song?
Okay, as I said before, the collection is mostly liturgical music, okay? However, he participated in recordings and supported recordings that other scholars did of Judeo-Spanish song. So he had his own collection that he did not initiate it, but he joined in the effort. And he certainly speaks about the lore of Jewish women in more than one place as integral part of the tradition of his city. Absolutely, yeah.
one more question.
What is being done was done with the Arabic-speaking part of Morocco, the Jewish traditions, similar to what Pinto did, but in the Arabic.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about liturgical music, I mentioned in the paper that basically the difference between the Arab-speaking and Spanish-speaking Jews became blurred due to the concentration of most Jews in Casablanca. So what you're here, when you heard, for example, the psalm singing, is very similar for Arab-speaking Moroccan Jews and from Spanish-speaking Moroccan Jews. Now, the main difference is actually in the realm of women. That's where language and musical style becomes much more differentiated between Arabic-speaking Jews and Spanish-speaking Jews. The two different linguistic traditions and two different musical styles, if I may say. So in terms of liturgy, what I mentioned and I show in the map, there were discrete traditions of Fez, Meknes, in the south, Marrakesh, Essaouira, but eventually the migration of most of the Jews into Casablanca created a lingua franca, a liturgical lingua franca, which is what you hear today in Moroccan synagogues in Israel, more or less. You go to one in Dimona and one in Kiryat Shmona, and they all sound more or less the same. The other issue is what we heard in the concert outside, Andalusian music. So Andalusian music tradition today is, first of all, is like the classical music of the Kingdom of Morocco, is the high class, is the tradition that is kept even personally by the king himself. So what is important is that this tradition, which It's in Hebrew, has an Arabic parallel, but in a sense, it's a tradition that joins once again all Moroccan Jews into a very interesting collaboration between North Moroccan Jews and South Moroccan Jews in terms of performing Andalusian music. So they all share a certain Hebrew repertoire, but there are differences of sometimes of the texts themselves. They're different in different traditions. But again, today, many Jewish musicians learn the Arabic repertoire. So they perform also in Arabic too, and they, in a way, translate today the Arabic tradition into Hebrew by putting Hebrew words to parts of the Andalusian music that were not part of the Jewish tradition, but is part now of the modern Andalusian tradition. It's a little bit complicated. This is a topic for not one lecture, but an entire seminar but this is the, I would say, the core of the encounter between Hebrew and Arabic culture in Morocco through music. And you heard a little bit outside, whoever was outside, and that's a subject for another time. But thank you for the question. Yeah.